I knew within the first 3 minutes that this was going to be the worst night of my life. Not awkward bad. Not mildly uncomfortable. I'm talking about the kind of bad that makes you question your judgment, your past decisions, and possibly your entire future. The kind of bad where every second feels stretched, heavy, and inescapable. I should have left when he laughed at the waiter for mispronouncing his name. I should have walked out when he checked his phone mid-sentence, not once, but 5 times. But I didn't. I stayed. And I had no idea that staying would change everything. Before we go further, if you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the idea that even the worst moments can lead to something beautiful, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles. Your support keeps stories like this alive. I hadn't wanted to go on the date in the first place. It was one of those setups arranged by a well-meaning friend who insisted I needed to put myself out there again. I had been single for nearly 2 years, still quietly recovering from a relationship that didn't just end, it collapsed, leaving behind pieces of me I was still trying to gather. I wasn't lonely in the obvious sense. I had a job, a small but loyal circle of friends, and a routine that felt safe. But safety, apparently, isn't the same as living. At least, that's what everyone kept telling me. So I agreed. Reluctantly. Cautiously. With expectations set so low they were practically underground. The restaurant was warm and softly lit, the kind of place that tries to make every table feel like its own private world. There were candles, gentle music, the faint clinking of glasses, and the comforting smell of food that reminded me of better nights. For a moment, as I stepped inside, I thought maybe this wouldn't be so bad. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe something good could come from this. Then he arrived. He didn't smile when he saw me. Not really. It was more of a quick acknowledgement, like I was a meeting he had squeezed into his schedule rather than a person he was curious about. He sat down, barely asked how I was, and launched into a long monologue about himself, his job, his achievements, his frustrations with people who couldn't keep up with him. I nodded when expected, tried to insert small comments, but they were swept aside like they didn't matter. And maybe they didn't. Not to him. As the minutes dragged on, I felt myself shrinking. It was a familiar feeling, one I thought I had left behind in my past relationship. The sense that my presence was optional, that my voice was background noise. I stared at the candle between us, watching the flame flicker, wondering how long it would take before I could politely excuse myself without seeming rude. That's when I noticed her. The waitress. She wasn't doing anything extraordinary at first glance. Just moving from table to table, taking orders, carrying plates. But there was something about her, something calm, steady, almost grounding. She made eye contact with people, really saw them, not just their orders. When she approached our table, she gave me a small, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't forced. It wasn't part of a routine. It felt intentional. My date barely acknowledged her. He ordered without looking up, then complained about the menu being overpriced for what it was. She didn't react. She simply nodded, wrote it down, and turned to me. When I spoke, she listened. It was such a small thing, but in that moment, it felt enormous. As the night went on, things only got worse. He criticized the food before even tasting it. He made dismissive comments about people at nearby tables. At one point, he laughed at a couple sitting across the room, calling them pathetic for holding hands. Each word chipped away at whatever patience I had left. I remember thinking, just 10 more minutes. Just get through 10 more minutes. When the waitress returned with our drinks, she placed mine gently in front of me, her eyes lingering for a second longer than necessary. And then, in a voice so quiet it barely rose above the music, she said something that didn't belong to the script of any ordinary evening. If I were you, I'd stay. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. Stay? Why would I stay? Everything in me was already halfway out the door. I looked at her, confused, searching her face for some kind of explanation. But she had already moved on to the next table, leaving behind a sentence that didn't make sense. And yet, it did something to me. It interrupted the pattern. It paused the automatic response to escape. It made me question, not the situation, but my reaction to it. I didn't leave. Not because of my date. Not because things suddenly improved. They didn't. He continued exactly as he had been, unaware of the storm he was creating. But something inside me shifted. Instead of counting minutes until I could go, I started observing. Not just him, but everything around me, the couple he had mocked. They weren't pathetic. They were older, maybe in their 60s, their hands intertwined with the kind of familiarity that only comes from years of choosing each other. There was a quiet tenderness between them, something steady and enduring. At another table, a father was helping his young daughter cut her food, his patience evident in every movement. She giggled at something he said, and he laughed with her, a sound full of warmth. And the waitress, she moved through it all like a quiet thread connecting the room. Offering small kindnesses, noticing things others didn't, that I began to realize that the night wasn't just about the date I was stuck in. It was about the choice I had, to close off, to endure, or to stay present and see what was still good, even in a bad moment. At some point, my date got up to take a phone call outside. He didn't apologize. He didn't explain. He just left me sitting there. And for the first time that evening, I felt relief. The waitress approached again, this time without pretense. She stood across from me, her expression softer now, more open. She asked if I was okay, and something in her tone made it clear she wasn't asking as part of her job. I told her the truth. Not all of it, but enough. That it wasn't going well. That I felt foolish for being there. That I didn't know why I hadn't left yet. She listened, the same way she had before. Fully, without interruption. Then she said something that would stay with me long after that night. She said that sometimes, the worst situations reveal the clearest truths. Not about other people, but about ourselves. She said that leaving would have been easy, and maybe even justified. But staying, even for a little while longer, had given me something different, a chance to see that I wasn't the same person I used to be. I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time. But I felt it. When my date returned, I was different. Not confrontational. Not angry. Just, done. I didn't need to endure him anymore, but I also didn't need to escape in a rush. I calmly told him I didn't think this was going to work and that I was leaving. He seemed surprised, maybe even slightly offended, but for once, his reaction didn't matter to me. I stood up, reached for my coat, and walked out. But before I left the restaurant, I stopped. I turned back, scanning the room until I found her. The waitress. She was at another table, but she looked up, as if she somehow knew I was there. I gave her a small nod, a silent thank you. She smiled, just like she had when I first walked in. And then I stepped outside. The air was cooler than I expected, the night quieter. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something that had been missing, not happiness. Not yet. But clarity. In the days that followed, I thought about that night more than I expected. Not about the terrible date, but about that single sentence, if I were you, I'd stay. It wasn't about staying in a bad situation. It was about staying present long enough to recognize your own worth, to see the difference between who you were and who you had become. It made me realize that I had been measuring my progress by the absence of pain, rather than the presence of strength. Weeks later, I went back to the restaurant. Not for a date. Just for myself. I didn't know if she would be there, but part of me hoped she would. And when I saw her, moving through the room with that same quiet grace, I felt an unexpected sense of gratitude. We spoke briefly. Nothing dramatic. No life-changing revelations exchanged in words. But I told her that what she said had mattered. That it had stayed with me. She smiled, and said that sometimes, people don't need grand gestures. Just a small moment of being seen. And that's what she had given me. Not advice. Not rescue. Just a moment. And somehow, that was enough to change everything. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of a moment when something small made a big difference, take a second to like, comment, and share this video. And if you've ever experienced a moment like this, we'd love to hear your story. Before you go, here's a special request: drop a comment with one kind thing someone did for you that you'll never forget. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And don't forget to subscribe to The Kindness Chronicles, where every story is a reminder that even in the most unexpected moments, kindness has the power to change everything.